The hardest business decision I ever had to make. It was July 23rd, 2021, and I got off the plane from visiting a gentleman named Scott Libby, CEO of Royal River Heat Pumps in Maine. I was looking to revamp my business model, and at the time I was exploring residential heat pumps as a viable solution to pivot from the saturated LED lighting market I had been a part of for the previous 5 years. I knew upon getting off the plane that I was going to have to make one of the hardest decisions of my business career up until that point. And that decision was to close down my business, which meant letting go of 10 of my 11 full-time staff members at the time. It was a Thursday, and I got off the plane around 12 p.m., and I was preparing to drive back to my office and deliver the news to my unexpected team at 4 p.m. when they got off of work. It was undoubtedly the hardest thing I've ever had to do in business. My staff had been with me for almost 3 years at that point, and were the reason that we had become the leading LED lighting agency on Long Island. Holy shit, was I scared. I drove around in circles for 3 hours before making it back to my office because I didn't know how I was going to let my team know that as of next week, they would no longer have a job at New World Lighting Solutions. I didn't know how I was going to do it. But the clock kept ticking, and the time was getting nearer to when our installers were going to be getting back from their day's work, and I knew I had to tell everyone that day because I had been running at a deficit the entire year. Every month from February on, we were losing $15K plus per month, and I couldn't afford to continue operating the business at such a loss. I literally had about 8 weeks left of working capital, and it was either I did it then and saved what little resources I had left, or continue losing money and end up having to inevitably do it 6 to 8 weeks later. And I couldn't do that because if I did, then that meant I wouldn't have anything to try to pick up the pieces and rebuild the business. So I mustered up the courage, and once everyone got back, I asked everyone to stay for an extra few minutes before leaving home so I can deliver the news that we were going to be closing our doors in the next few weeks. I was as honest as I could have been with them and didn't blow smoke up their asses. I told them that we were operating at a loss for the entire year up until that point, and that I had no other choice but to shut down the business. To my surprise, they all seemed to understand and were sympathetic with me, and did not make me feel any worse than I already felt. I think they saw in my demeanor that I had felt defeated and that I had no other choice. I told everyone that a week from that day we were going to be shutting our doors and that the upcoming payroll would be their last. I'll never forget that moment the rest of my life. I felt defeated. I felt like I let everyone down. I felt like a failure. Up until that point, I had tried everything in my power to pick the business back up. The entire year I was exploring alternate business models in an attempt to revitalize the business, but all of those attempts were unsuccessful. COVID had kicked our ass, and there was nothing that I was going to be able to do. At the time, I did not realize that sometimes things must burn down in order to grow again. I was holding on by the grit of my teeth to keep something afloat that quite honestly needed to sink. You see, in one's journey, sometimes you need to know when to close a chapter and when to begin a new one. At that time, I was stuck in that chapter. I was holding on to something that was pulling away from me. And it wasn't until I couldn't afford to keep holding on that I had to let go. I probably would have held on longer if I could have afforded to, but as Kevin Hart would say, the way my bank account was set up. And now, exactly 1 year later, I have internalized a lesson from that experience. And that lesson is this: don't be afraid of the future. The future can be much brighter than you could ever imagine if you choose to walk courageously towards it. Change is the only thing that is guaranteed, and trying to hold on to something due to fear of what lies around the corner can lead you to not experience the beauty on the other side. If I did not close down my company exactly 369 days ago, I would not be sitting here in the position that I am, happier than I have ever been on the cusp of building something 1,000 times as big as my previous business. I would have never imagined in a million years that I'd be where I am at this very point, at this very moment, writing this article. Life knocked me 6 ways from Sunday this past year. It literally blew my entire life up with the Hiroshima bomb, only to allow me to pick up the pieces and rebuild from scratch with a clean plate. You see, sometimes when a plant gets too big for a pot, the only way it can continue to grow is to be repotted in a larger pot. If it stays in the same pot it was in the past, it would never be able to grow to the plant it could be in the future. Sometimes the hardest decisions can lead to the most beautiful outcomes. And so it is. Peace.